Welcome back to the third edition of Baitman Raw here on YouTube and also available for download on PodBean. You can find the Baitman Raw channel on PodBean by going to the website, podbean.com, click in the search bar, and just type in Baitman. And there you can follow my PodBean channel to get updates on when new episode goes live. And that is great for guys that want to download and listen on the go. You can download on Wi-Fi at home, and then when you're driving, you can push the play button. You can listen to it without burning up your data. So this is the third episode of Baitman Raw. Took a little bit of a break. We had the Christmas holidays, and here we are just 2 days from the new year. And I've got a special guest on this episode. His name is Lee Livesay, 2020 Bassmaster Classic qualifier. Has one of the best fish catches from last year on the Bassmaster Elite Series. You can just look that up on YouTube. I'll put a link to it in the description here on my YouTube channel. And Lee is a big fish guy. He comes from Texas, cut his teeth on those East Texas lakes, especially Lake Fork. And that is a big bass factory. And he's a guy that really enjoys the grind and fishing for the 5 biggest bites you can get. And he finished 12th on the Angler of the Year standings this year. Had a great run in the Elite Series. And I think he kind of gained a lot of fans that didn't really know who he was just because of his style of fishing. And for the people who follow this channel and follow me, I'm not an expert on swim baits. I do like to throw them quite a bit. I can't say that I excel at it, and I'm always wanting to learn. And he's a guy that has a lot of experience throwing swim baits, and that's something we're going to talk a lot about. Soft plastic swim baits versus hard baits, when to throw which, and does he actually use them during these Elite Series events? And that's something you don't see a whole lot of. You see a lot of swim baits, but what I've noticed by reading articles and other thing, it seems like a lot of the guys are just using the smaller paddle tails like a Kitech for a numbers deal or to get a limit. You've got guys like Buddy Gross and a few others, Alex Davis, that throw the bigger soft plastic boot tails and paddle tails, such as a Scottsboro swim bait, which a lot of guys are using these days, especially on those lakes on the Tennessee River chain that's got these big gizzard shad. But there's also a place for big swim baits, I believe, on the Pro Tour, and that's something that Lee's going to talk about, and really excited to share that with you. But not a whole lot of news going on. And before I really get farther into the podcast, I have to give a shout out to 6 Cents Fishing. They have really supported this channel, the podcast, and you can use the code Baitman anytime for any order and get 10% off. And they got some bomb new plastics as well. Really like the new prawn, creature flipping bait, the stroker craw, and they got tons of great colors to go along with their unbelievable hard bait selection. And you know what? I've got a box full of it, been using their stuff for years, and it just keeps getting better. And if you get on the website, you don't really know what you want to buy, but you want to get some 6 Cent stuff, I encourage you to sign up for the 6 Cents monthly subscription sack. The premium box is going to give you lots of really great baits from 6 Cents. And I have a code that saves you $10. It's Baitman Super 6. One word, Baitman Super 6, and just use the number 6. You don't have to spell it out. That'll get you $10 off your first monthly subscription box. And you can do just 1 month, you can do 2, you can do 3 months. It's totally up to you, and you can even tailor that box to fit your fishing needs. All right, guys, on Baitman Raw, I am really excited to have Lee Livesay. He is a Bassmaster Elite Series angler, and he is qualified for the Bassmaster Classic on Lake Guntersville this spring, and it'll be here really soon. Lee, how excited are you about that?
And I'm really, really excited. It'll be my first trip to the Classic. So, I mean, I really don't even think it's kicked in still. And, I qualified a long time ago. So, it's just one of those deals that I'm just like anybody else that dreams about it, but doesn't ever think they're going to be there. And all of a sudden they're there. So, I mean, I can't even I can't wait. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us as fishermen, we've all had that dream of fishing in the Bassmaster Classic, and going to a really good lake that you're from Lake Fork, so you're used to catching big fish, and going to a place like Guntersville, that has to be weighing in your head. You can kind of swing for the fences there.
Yeah, it kind of fits my cup of tea, especially that's southern impoundment with some grass. Early in the year, early March there is kind of our middle to later February, and that's kind of when I feel like my strong suit, my strong point as a fisherman is. So I'm really excited about it. I can't wait to get there, and it's the classic. Don't have to fish for points, so it's, you're trying to get in that Super Six and make the final day to win. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on in the fishing world, and you said something that's pretty interesting. You're not having to fish for points; you can just go big or go home. But tell us a little bit about yourself, that people may not know you. I know you got really famous for a really awesome fish catch at the St. Johns River, but tell us a little bit about you and where you do most of your fishing. I know you're kind of a Lake Fork guy, and like throwing big baits. I see you on the Swimbait forums all the time, and you're definitely like me. I think interested in a lot of stuff, but you got your own favorites as well.
Yeah, I grew up in Oklahoma until I was 9, and then moved to East Texas and started fishing Fork and all the surrounding lakes around East Texas. And went to college, played football, got done, went straight back to Fork and started a guide business. And I've been doing that the last 7 years, and that's kind of it. I'm a Fork junkie, like a lot of the people that moved around here and started fishing here in the mid to late 90s. Especially, it was just a different beast back then. It's just an addicting lake, and it still is when you get there. And I just grew up fishing there, and we were John boat trolling motor guys. My dad wasn't a bass fisherman, but I liked it. He'd take me out there in John boat with a trolling motor and 2 batteries and drop me off the Minnebucket ramp. I'd have a battery to fish on, then a battery to make sure I got back to the ramp, and I'd walk up to the Minnebucket and get the phone from Tony and call my dad, and he'd come pick me up. That's kind of what I grew up doing, fishing as far as I could with a trolling motor, and it evolved from there. And now we're throwing $500 swim baits.
Yeah.
And catching big bass, and that's kind of how it all started.
Right, that Lake Fork, East Texas, Oklahoma area has really put out a lot of big time anglers. I mean, just off the top of my head, yourself, I joke, the king of Lake Fork, Kelly Jordan, from there, and then you've got all those Oklahoma anglers: Jason Christie, Edwin Evers, Zach Burge, Jeff Sprague. I mean, there's something about that area that just produces really good fishermen.
Yeah, we have a lot of diversity here, just like we're Sprague. I was with Sprague yesterday catfishing, but the lake he lives on, the Lake Milwaukee, and the fish don't get deeper than about 3 foot of water for the most part because of the stripers and the blue cats. And you got Fork, where the bass are dominant. You can fish anything from grass, timber, deep, shallow, shells, anything. And then, we have power plant lakes here where they're on beds right now. We got deep clear water lakes towards Dallas that have smallmouth. We have everything here, so it's a good place to learn and power fish and catch big ones. And I think that kind of helps you when you go to the elites. When you're trying to catch big ones, it is what it is. You got to catch your biggest size you can catch every day. And it's a good place to go up. There's a lot of water around here you can fish.
Yeah, and I always said one thing that helped the guys around our area, Terry Bolton's from here, and Dan Moorhead and Ramey Colson and those guys, was being here on Kentucky Barkley Lakes. Everyone knows them as ledge lakes, but really, that's only about 2 months out of the year. They're pretty versatile, but if you get outside and just want to drive an hour or two, You know, you can go to Percy Priest around Nashville, Old Hickory. You can go down to Chick, Dale Hollow. All those are 2 or 3 hour drives. So this, I think, a lot of where you grow up can really help determine how successful you can be at the top level. You either got it or you don't. Let's be honest. But being able to be more versatile without having to drive across the country really helps.
Yeah, I agree totally. And it, you know, a lot of the opens, getting into kind of the bass stuff, I mean, a lot of the places they've seen, especially in the Central Division, aren't that good. You know, you go to the Red River, you go to the Sabine River, Arkansas River, maybe later in the year, you have to learn how to fish crappy water efficiently behind people with a, you know, 150 to 250 boat field with no off limits, and you have to be able to power fish and finesse fish on, you know, tidal fisheries, rivers, and reservoirs around here. So, I mean, I can get to, you know, the Sabine River in 3 hours, the Red River is 45 minutes, and Arkansas River is, you know, 4 or 5 hours, but there's just a lot of places you get to grow over here in my area of the country.
Right. So
it's not always the finest big bags, and people that fish it realize that we end up going to you know, places that aren't that great, and you know, it is what it is. You got to catch them. So you learn more when you fish in tough places than you do fishing great places.
it also gives you a little bit more of a satisfaction feeling when you're fishing a really tough body of water and you catch them really good. You kind of know coming at the ramp, I mean, you know, wow, you know, I got a 17-pound bag on a place that, you know, 14, 15 pounds is like, holy cow. So, that's the part of fishing for the 5 best bites I like is just that grind all day, fish your butt off, and you figure it out and it clicks. I mean, there's a nice reward for that usually.
Yeah, I agree. The first open I ever fished was on the Arkansas River in June or July. I think it was in June. And I caught 22 pounds on the Arkansas River in June the second day. And that was probably you know, I've got all these big 40-pound bags on fork on guide trips and stuff. And that little 22-pound bag in June on the Arkansas River was, you know, my chest was poked out the most coming in to weigh in with Jason Christie and all those Northern Oklahoma guys there when I pulled up. Just knowing the fishery and how tough it was, you know, 12, 13 pounds was getting you in the top 10 there, and coming in with that 22-pound bag on a tough fishery had me more excited than anything in my life.
Yeah, speaking of the opens, it's definitely going to be interesting this coming year with all the new faces coming in to try to qualify for the Elite Series. I mean, there's a star-studded field. You could almost have your own version of Bass Live just for the opens. And I'm not sure if they're doing that or not. But man, there's a lot of guys, a lot of people are rooting for, and I think it's a good thing. You know, I've tried to be in the middle. I like some things Major League Fishing's done. You know, FLW's here in my hometown, and I like bass. I mean, there's a lot of my good friends had fished bass and still fish bass, and I think this thing in the long run is going to be good for the consumer because you're going to see a lot of really good fishermen go toe to toe for just a few spots, and it makes those guys like yourself that have locked into the Elite Series, Classic qualifiers, makes them even more solid. I mean, guys are like, wow, these guys are in here; they're the best of the best.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be I was talking about that yesterday with Sprague. That I wish they did some live videos with the opens next year. And I mean, and I don't know who's off fishing them yet. I know Castledine, Scott Martin, Holman, Upshaw, Latimer, Randy, just to name a few off the top of my head. And I mean, it's going to be like a little miniature Elite Series. And I'm excited to watch it, you know. And, you know, I'm a fan of the sport, you know, fishing the sport, just because that's, you know, I'm nobody to me, so I don't care. I want to watch it, so I'm excited to watch it and see how it unfolds too.
Yeah, you know, Lake Fork, and I have to be very careful when I talk about it because, you know, you're going there, but that was kind of the original. It's such a great lake because of the slot limit, and maybe explain to guys why that slot limit was put into Fork, and how it became such a trophy fishery, and people want to watch guys fish for big bass on Lake Fork.
It's our slot is 16 to 24 inches on Fork now. It's changed once or twice, but years and years and years ago. And we have to release anything. We can't even live well anything between 16 and 24 inches. So anything, you know, over, you never know, just call it 9 pounds. I mean, that's the only thing that's going to be over 24 inches. And I've seen an 11 and a half that was 22 inches. So you never know.
Wow.
So all those trophy fish in that, you know, just say 3 to 9 pound range, you can't even put it in your live well. You got to let it go right then. It gets to go back and breed. The only fish that are kept, the only fish that can be consumed are those under 16-inch fish, those immature fish. And you're only allowed one fish over 24 inches a day in your live well for a tournament, or, you know, if somebody was to mount one or something, which it doesn't happen anymore, you know. I'm sure that's very, very, very far and few in between on our lake. You know, we have really good replica companies around the lake. Us guides and the locals push that as well, but it's just like the perfect breeding ground to breed fish. You know, we're breeding the future in that 4 to 9 pound range.
Absolutely. You know, when I was younger growing up, it seemed a lot of guys really detested that slot limit. But we've got, you know, Del Hollow here's got a slot limit, and the smallmouth fishing is unreal there. And, you know, unfortunately, Kentucky Lake's not what it was. Lots of factors. You know, I don't want to just point the blame at the carp, which it's a lot their fault, but, you know, fish mortality. Big thing is really overlooked is the bad spawns we've had on Kentucky Lake, and that can just be devastating to a fishery. But these slot limits, they really do help out, especially when the anglers adhere to them. And something you mentioned was the replica mounts. And I remember reading Bassmaster magazine a long time ago, and the first time I heard of it was Lake Fork taxidermy. You know, and I actually went in there with Kelly one day and looked at the stuff, and he said there's no reason a man should ever mount the bass they caught when you can get replica mounts that look this good. And they've got it down to a science over there. And I know there's several other great companies too.
Yeah, and they last way longer than a real mount does, a skin mount. And at any marina you go in at Lake Fork, there's going to be 4 or 5 different sets of business cards with different replica, you know, organizations that'll be your replica. So it's, you know, it's there's different worlds and different places. You know, Falcon's a totally different place than Fork, and Toledo Bend's a totally different place than Fork as far as keeping fish. Not that those have slots, but just the general perception from one place to the other is, you know, night and day sometimes. And Fork is just one of those places where everybody that comes there gets it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a destination lake. Speaking of, you know, Lake Fork marinas and little businesses around Lake Fork, one that I kind of noticed you're associated with, and this is in the Swimbait game. So now we're going to talk some baits for a while, Lee. We're going to talk some Swimbaits. You seem to have a really good connection to Mikey over there at 316, and believe it or not, the first Swimbait I ever bought was a 316 mission fish. I actually found them yesterday in my dad's tackle boxes, and one of them was chewed up and the other one was like brand new. So tell me about your relationship with 316 and some of the baits that you really like from them, and maybe some hidden gems not a lot of guys talk about.
Oh man, that's tough. Mickey's got some stuff that'll blow your mind. I talked to Mickey just a second ago. Mickey is a strange cat, which I think most good swim bait fishermen and most fishermen are.
I would agree to that.
He's got more stuff that he's never released than anybody will ever know. It blows my mind. He'll bring a box of stuff out and, yeah, man, look at this. Look at this right here, man. This thing right here is, you know, this is my Huddleston. You know, I'm just not saying that really, but just comparing, you know. And I was like, okay, let me see it in the water. Let me see it in the water, you know. Let me see what I can do, and I'll play with it. Now, man, he's got this juice. I mean, he's got the best stuff. He makes the best stuff in the world, and I'm not trying to push his stuff. I'm just being a realist. That's what I throw because he makes the best quality swim baits out. And there's a bunch of great stuff out there. Don't get me wrong, but his stuff I've never had a problem with, and it's just good stuff. You know, he's got a lot of stuff that I don't know why he won't release. You know, he's a perfectionist, and he's gonna sell what he sells until he gets everything else right. He won't put it out there. He won't even give it to me. You know, he'll just show it to me. Tease me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. You know, because I'm good friends with Mike Buka of Bullshed. He's the same way. He's told me many times. He said, Kevin, I've got 15 to 20 baits I could release any day if I just want to make money, but I don't want people to get a bait and not be satisfied.
Right.
It shouldn't take a college degree to figure out how to get this bait to swim right. And I respect that to these bait makers that, you know, they could put a bunch of stuff on the market and they could go make money, but if guys aren't coming back and buying your stuff, and man, you know, I love the Swimbait Underground, Swimbait Universe on Facebook. I'm very opinionated on there sometimes, as you've seen, but those guys, these 316's got a very low following. The one I really kind of started to use, and I'll be honest, I haven't caught but one or two fish on it, is the Rising Sun. But man, that's a bait I need to throw a whole lot more. I really need to figure it out here.
Yeah, man, I couldn't be any further away from you. I probably got more on a Rising Sun than anything out there. You know, before I knew Mickey and what 316 really was, I was ordering his stuff a long time ago. Like the 5-inch, the shad, the 5-inch bluegills, and the mission fish. You know, I was bed fishing with mission fish. I was throwing the shad and the bluegill at night is what I was doing. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was young, but I mean, we were murdering them at night on board with them back. I'm talking about back when I was in high school. Yeah. I didn't have a clue, and it evolved from there. But all of the Rising Sun stuff, from the 7-inch to the 8-inch to the weedless to the top hook, bottom hook, it's just, you know, everything kind of has its place. From, you know, everybody around Fork when they're on shell beds, those the 7 and 8-inch, you know, bottom hook Rising Sun, you know, because the fish eat it up. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, when you know, those fish will transition out just a little bit further, and you'll throw the top hook and drag it on the bottom, and I've killed them like that. And then you make the weedless, and when Rayburn and Toledo are high and the water's in the bushes, you can, you know, skip a weedless Rising Sun in the bushes and around the trees and stuff on braid, and just the fish have never seen it before, you know.
Right. That's two things here. It's funny you mentioned the top hook Rising Sun, because I was at Scottsboro Tackle, and he's one of the few shops that actually carries 316. And I was in there, and he had this huge display, and I was looking at the weedless Rising Suns. He said, dude, the one you want for what you like to do is the top hook Rising Sun, you know, fish deeper. And you talk about skipping a swim bait, it shows kind of how versatile these baits have become. It's not just to throw it out in open water and reel it in. I started skipping a Bass Tricks a few years ago. Not the most durable bait for that. It's going to tear up. So I had to change to like a Scottsboro style paddle tail, something a little bit more durable. But what you talked about fishing swim baits at night. I love night fishing. I'm a spinnerbait guy. What do you do different? Do you do anything different color-wise or retrieve-wise at night with the swim bait that you want to do during the day, or you just do the same thing and act like it's not even night outside?
Same thing, man. We were throwing it right back in the day where we were throwing big spinnerbait back then, you know. Nothing different. You know, the shad that we were throwing is kind of like I think it's like a dark gray with a little whitish belly, and the bluegill looked like a little bluegill. I mean, those were the two main ones we threw, and we threw the mission fish at night too, because it was weedless. and the other ones had a treble hook on the bottom, but just slow rolling it over hydrilla back in the day. Throwing some on lights, it was pole lights back then. It wasn't no underwater lights. And on show beds was the big deal on main lake points with show beds and hydrilla. Just slow rolling them right over the top of them. It was they had never seen it before. It was amazing back then.
That's pretty crazy. That's something I would love to add to my arsenal. Of course, when I fish here at night, I always target those brown fish. I love catching those big smallmouth at night. But
right.
And I kind of learned from a guy that he was a religious spinnerbait guy, and that's pretty much what I did. But I started catching a lot of fish in really hot August nights and stuff, flipping in like a foot or 2 foot of water where those fish normally wouldn't be in the day, and I had a lot of success with that. But sticking on swim baits, I asked some questions on the swim bait universe, and this was kind of asked a lot. You're fishing the Elite Series, and I see all these guys naming their top baits and stuff. They're talking about Cincos and football jigs, and the smallmouth lakes are notorious for the small finesse swim baits. But what are some of the typical swim baits you're going to take when you're fishing a tournament?
As far as big baits go?
Yeah, if it's a tournament day, let's say just a normal tournament day, you don't know where you're going, but if you could take about 5 or 6 swim baits, what are you going to take with you to kind of cover all your bases?
I keep all my stuff, and I'm not, I look on those sites all the time, Swimbait Universe, Underground, all that, and there's all kinds of stuff out there. I don't even know what it is. Those guys are into their niche. But I'm a big burrito baits guy.
Oh yeah, I just got one in the mail yesterday.
And Yale doesn't even know it, but I used to get a lot of his baits through a marina before he started getting big, before anybody knew about it. I was getting them all from the Ernie guy at the marina. But I'm a big burrito baits guy, so I'm going to have a taquito and a burrito. I'm going to have a Rising Sun. I'm going to have a Depths 250 and a 175, because you catch them on both. I know everybody hates on the 175, but I've got Jaints on it.
Dude, I love the 175. The first time I seen a Depths in action was the 175, and I was like, okay, this is the one.
Yeah, well, I got a bunch, and I have a lot of people when I'm catching them on a 250 or something, but I'll have a lot of clients that can't throw the 250. I'm scared they're going to throw it off, or they're older or whatever, or just new to it, to throwing weight, and I'll get them. You can throw 175 really easy, just like a 15, 22 almost, a little bit more, but here's what it is: it catches fish. So, but anyway, back to the question: taquito, burrito, Rising Sun, both 250 and a 175. I'm taking my 316 workhorse. A HUD stays in my boat for sure. Ospreys and the S-Waver. And I'm sure I'm leaving something out. Those are the main catching baits. And I keep one thing, no matter where I go.
Oh, yeah.
It's 2 things, but they're just reaction. There's bull shad and triple trout. They're really underrated baits to catch smallmouth and largemouth on any time of the year. Because a lot of times I've caught them really good smallmouth, especially later in the summer, going into fall on those little weird tournaments where it's not that great, but a bait like a bull shad that you can reel 100 miles an hour and make them react to it.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen either show them really good or catch them really good with smallmouth and largemouth. So that's kind of my group of baits right there, and the HPH I kind of mix in as well. But it kind of goes back to the depths and the workhorse. So that's my group of baits right
there. When did you start really getting into more of the glide baits, like the workhorse? And I don't know if you consider a depths a glide bait, but You know, I get asked that question a lot, and they say, "Hey, what's the difference between a glide bait and a swim bait?" And I'm like, you know, you can tell them, but they don't really understand it till they really see it. And I think a lot of people
Yeah.
get caught up in looking at this, like, oh, it's super realistic, and they throw it out there and they make about 4 cranks, and they go, well, this ain't doing what I thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
It
I probably I got started, you know, when I kind of before I started guiding on fork, I was getting into it more into the hard bait stuff, and then I had where I was guiding out of, where I started the RV park that I started out of. Mac McIntyre, the guy that owned it, was from California, Arizona area, and his son out there, and him threw big baits. And Mac was older, but his son James McIntyre was still throwing, you know, big baits out in, you know, California and Arizona, wherever he was at the time. And both of them are the first ones that actually said, "Hey, you know, here's this." You know, I was like, "What is this?" You know, "Here's this." You know, I have a connection to get this stuff that I could never get. You know, that was my first connection out there to the West Coast and the Japan market that I didn't have a clue. This country due from East Texas, but, you know, bigger is better for me, but I didn't know. And James and Matt kind of both started getting me baits, you know, and then and I, you know, okay, this is actually pretty cool. And then James came probably a year or two later on a guide trip on fork, and it was like prime. It was like so good. The lake was low in the spring, and, you know, he'd been fishing out west his whole life, and, you know, whatever they get, you know, 3 to 6 bites a day on the 250 out there is great, you know, where he was fishing, you know. And we had like, and it's not like this anymore, but the first day he came, we had like 40 bites on a 250, and it was, and, you know, ospreys and rising suns and stuff too. But he was just blown away, like, dude, I've never seen. And it was a good day too, but that day right there just resonates. That was the day it kind of clicked. Like, okay, I need to learn more about this kind of stuff. You know, because I thought I knew, but I didn't know anything. I still don't know anything, but that's kind of it kick-started a little fire in me, and I started digging and, you know, pulling skins and weighting baits and different hooks and different line, and, you know, making sure everything was perfect, and messing with buoyancy and 250s and everything, you know. And that's kind of when it clicked with me, and that was right when I first started guiding. Kind of went from there, so that's where it all kind of started, was right there.
Yeah. So how much have you incorporated those styles of swim baits into tournament fishing on the Elite Series? I know a lot of guys like the glide baits and stuff. Like Steve Kennedy used the Sneaky Pete, I believe it was at Hartwell, to help him find the fish that eventually he went and caught on a kayak and in another way. Is that something you like to do if you've got time to cover some water with some of these bigger swim baits, just to get fish to reveal themselves and maybe eliminate some water?
Yeah, especially there's kind of 2 things there that happened this year. Was Lanier. I did the same thing. I know Steve did it, Randy Pearson did it, and I did it, and I found him on an S waiver, a trout colored S waiver that I saw. You know, it was just one spot, but I pulled up there and caught 2 big ones in the 3 days. Almost made top 12, but they would reveal themselves at Lanier, big spots with the clear water. And then I had some in Florida where I was throwing a weedless 5-inch rising sun that kind of revealed themselves, blew up on a bait, and little bitty dollar. It was the same stuff Rick Clun was in when he won. I mean, I was right beside Rick, but I found a few of those fish between the docks on a 5-inch rising sun. I never caught them, but I saw them, you know, and I came back and then threw a Cinco in there and Steckle Frog, stuff like that. But where I see it is anywhere we got clear water, whether it was like at Lanier with a glide, and then I found fish at 10 Killer late in the summer with a bull shad, smallmouth sugar cells, clear water. And then I see it just when fish are on beds in general, like with the Rising Sun or the 316 Minnow, or, you know, Matt Airy throws a bait, whatever it is, which is just pretty much a copy of the 316 minnow, but you'll see fish come off beds or pull off laydowns and stuff like that to show themselves. You know, I didn't catch a lot of them on this year, but there was 3 different times that I actually located fish and caught them.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting approach to using these big baits and swim baits in general at the tournament scene. I know it's crazy. You know, you read the swim bait universe and stuff, and there's these guys are so dedicated. You know, they're all about 1 or 2 bites a day. Not worried about catching them; they just want 1 or 2 bites a day. But this is your job, and a
Right.
lot of 1 or 2 bites a day isn't going to get it done. You need 5 fish each day, and so you're using it more as a tool to help you execute your job, other than just go out there and catch a big one.
Correct, and it's they're always tied on in the box, even on game day, and it's always, hey man, if I catch, wherever, if I'm at Lanier and I catch 18 pounds, I'm gonna go throw that S waiver all day. Or I'm gonna go throw that bull shad at 10 kilo after I catch 14 pounds all day, and one day it'll get there, and you might catch 2 or 3 of them on it, but until then, it's just the tool you pull out when you need it. And like at Fort, I lived and died by it, but I knew it was a little bit late in the year, but I still caught them on the rising sun every day. Or the first day I caught, I was in the top 10 with it, but the second day I died by it, and it was my second worst finish of the year on my home lake. But it was one of those deals where I know the deal. We had a lot of rain. The lake came up. I knew the guys were going to catch them on the bank, but I was going to keep it in my hand, because if I hit one spot where they bite, I'm going to catch, 25 to 45 pounds, depending on the school, in 15 minutes, as fast as I can. And the first day I survived, I had a couple 7-pounders come off. I'm in the top 3, and then the second day it just never happened, and I died and fell out of the cut 1 or 2 places, and had a bad finish, and ultimately cost me Rookie of the Year. So it's a great thing. You love it, and it's one of those deals when you have confidence in it, it can kill you at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of like falling in love with the 3-point shot in college basketball. Teams live by it, and they also die by it, especially in March. But I love talking to you here, Lee. Do you think the Swimbait could be a player in the Classic at Guntersville?
It will be for sure.
Well,
no doubt about it. If the water's just a little bit on the warm side, it'll really play.
I think that would be very interesting, because for the most part, we've seen very traditional shallow cranking stuff, like at Fort Loudon. I should know that. Knoxville's my favorite town ever. And just, your traditional spring fishing. I would love to see just a big fish, big bait showdown for the biggest bass fishing tournament on the planet. That would be awesome.
Yeah, it's going to fall into place. There's a lot of good grass still. There was this year in June when I was there, or July. I think we were there in July. There was a lot of eelgrass, a lot of hydrilla, a little bit of milfoil, and it's one of those deals that if the water's clear enough and the water's a little bit, it's got to be a little bit warmer than people think for them to really get on it. But it can be one of those deals where you can pull up and get on the right little deal, whether it's a bridge or grass or shell, and catch 30, 35 pounds on it as quick as you can. Now, if you can do it for 3 days, I don't know, but it'll be in my arsenal for sure, and I'm excited to get over there and try it.
All right, let's say you're sitting in the Super 6, and it's the last day. What swim bait are you pulling out to catch the mega sack?
6-inch rising sun.
6-inch rising sun. Now,
rising sun.
On that rising sun, are you pretty much? I see most guys like the bluegill. Are you pretty much a bluegill guy on it, or do you prefer some of the shad patterns, or you just try to match whatever the forage is at the lake you're at?
Man, I'm not a bluegill guy at all. That's what's weird. I'm a Clear Lake hitch guy. Bait fish if it's cloudy. IU, American shad. I'm not a bluegill guy at all. Never have been.
Mm-mm.
I'm a shad fan. I love the hitches. The light hitch is my favorite. I'm throwing shad patterns all day. I don't want to beat my bluegill. I want to beat a shad.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I love throwing a crankbait, and I'm pretty much a shad or chartreuse and blue, some short of that, or I like some purple in there. And I've just now started getting around to throwing a few gill colors, but to me, that I always felt like a bluegill was a northern thing. But I'm seeing more guys use hard crankbaits and swim baits and some gill patterns that gives me a little confidence. But day in and day out, you give me a shad pattern swim bait, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm not a gill guy. I don't even like the gill guide stuff. I'm a firm believer in the largemouth want to eat big gizzard shad.
Right.
Taste, protein, and just being able to eat it easier. That's what I'm looking for, shad eaters. And I think there's big skipjack in Guntersville too. I might be wrong about that, but that's pretty much a shad. So I'm looking for those shad and big skipjack herring eaters.
It is funny you did talk about at Lanier. The S waiver was a trout pattern. That just proves that bass are going to eat, whether you got trout in your lake or not, or you got gizzard shad or not. When they see a big meal, they're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and that just brings us back to the swim bait conversation in general, man. Draw power is what it's all about. Draw power on a slow bait, a glide, or like a rising sun type deal hood, or reaction on a triple trout bullshit deal. It's all about draw power, whether it's making them react or making them think it's real. So, and I've seen it where like the beast glide would catch one on this point right here in front of me. We're throwing rising suns and workhorses and let my clients throw in there 10 times. I'm like, man, I know there's a fish in there, and pull out that beast glide and throw it in there and catch one first cast just because the draw power is so much better that fish reacts to it. So I'm a firm believer in draw power, whether they eat it or not, is huge.
Yeah, I would say the only bait other than a swim bait that's got any drawing power, and I don't really know if it's drawing power, but bringing the fish to you, most baits you have to take the bait to the fish. A worm or a jig, you drag it to them. Even a crankbait, for the most part, they don't chase it a whole lot. You bring it by their face, they react to it. Would be a jerk bait. You draw those suspended bass up there to
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Jerkbait and a swim bait are really the only baits in your tackle box that you're trying to move a fish from point A to point B. You're not going to them. And I think that's also what makes them really good.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
And by the way, I'm not an expert, Lee. I suck at fishing. That's why you're fishing the Classic. I just know a lot about the baits. I'm going to go to a few questions I've got here on the Swimbait universe and give them a good shout out here. This is a good question from the head guy, Wayne Campbell. What baits have you seen other guys using? And he says, save the NASCAR sponsor line. So what's some stuff out there that guys are using that they don't talk about? And you don't have to name them. Definitely don't do that. We don't want to out nobody. We don't want anyone to lose 10% off or anything. So, what's some stuff you've seen on the decks or on the rods and reels that they're not talking about, but they're catching fish on?
Man, that's a tough question. I mean, a lot of those guys aren't telling anything too top secret. I mean, we don't have anything crazy that y'all don't have. Those Swimbait universe guys have more than we do. Trust me. I'm not saying they don't have a little inside edge on some of the stuff, but most of our guys keep it as simple as you can imagine. I mean, a lot of guys are throwing the little Storm Glide and the Bait Sandy Explorer and stuff like that. But that's just generic stuff. I mean, we're fishing the elites, but y'all guys know more than we do. Trust me.
Yeah, and I think that all goes back to fishing for one or two bites versus having to put food on your table as well. Because you know as well as I do, you're going to have to lean on the traditional tackle a whole lot more than just a swim bait.
No doubt about it. I wish I had a really cool answer for that, but I honestly don't.
Yeah, I mean, as many of these guys I've been around, for the most part, the guys that throw swim baits that you don't hear about, like the Polnick and Carl Jacobson and even Iconelli is known to he's thrown glides and stuff. For the most part, guys keep it pretty simple, ancient. Bass tricks on a beast hook or on a jig head and Kitex and some Scottsboro swim baits. You hear a little bit about the rising sun, but that's pretty much the gist of it. Guys don't get into all the real craziness. You don't hear about the high power herrings or depths 250s very often or anything like this. It's very simple on the tours, it seems.
As simple as it can be, and I have all that stuff and a little bit more, but it has to be, the stars have to align for everything to work out just right for us on that stuff.
Well, I'm going to jump off the swim bait stuff and let's just talk a little bit more of regular fishing. I heard through the grapevine you got a couple of sponsors for next year. One of them might be a company that makes a really good jig trailer, one of the OGs, Netbait. Is that correct? Have you teamed up with Netbait for next year?
Yeah, I got Walt and everybody on board. I signed pretty much everything that's American Bait Works except Freedom, so I'm excited about all those deals next year. I've been using Netbait for a long time. They have more stuff than people realize is what's crazy. They have a little bit of everything, and myself included. I didn't. Once I saw Walt the other day at Guntersville and got in his truck and went through a bunch of stuff that I didn't know they had. And they have everything.
Yeah, it's
your speed worm type of stuff, the crawls, the swim baits, everything, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's always funny, and I love Strike King Rage crawls, and Sixth Sense has got their new plastics, and I like them. Haven't got to use them a whole lot. It's been cold other than this week, but when you go back to this whole soft plastic with lots of action in the claws and flappers, it all pretty much goes back to that packer crawl. And you had the packer crawl, then the Chigger crawl, then the Rage crawl, and then we are now. But man, when that net bait packer crawl first hit, it's like Bass never seen it. It was unreal.
Yeah, yeah, ain't no doubt about it. Been using them forever on port, flipping stumps. January, February, March.
And the good thing is, if you're a guide, net bait's not expensive, so you can take 5 or 6 packs and divvy them out to clients and not be hurting, because chances are you're going to catch a couple of them Jaints and they'll give you a nice tip anyway.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, man. I'm ready to get kind of everything they have in the arsenal in my boat and play around with it, because that's one thing, like you mentioned, guiding. I can put baits in front of a lot of customers and show them what works and show them that they really work. And NetBait has a bunch of stuff that I'm really, really ready to see work this year.
Well, I know they make a great little swim bait called a Little Spanky, and I know what the Little Spanky is really good for. It's putting on a Hog Farmer Alabama rig. And I think you got a little partnership with Hog Farmer going as well, from what I hear.
Correct. Yeah. The Hog Farmer stuff is top quality, and we're going to Chick this year, and we're going to Fork this year. And I've been using Hog Farmer for as long as I knew about it. Put it that way. And the big Spanky and the Little Spanky will go on the underspins the Hog Farmer makes and the A-rigs when I'm guiding. I can't be more excited about both of them, to be honest. Hog Farmer makes really good quality stuff that catches big fish, and we're going to big fish lakes, so I can trust my tackle, my terminal stuff, and roll with it.
Yeah, I always tell guys that are new to A-rigging, there's 2 ways you can go here. You can go buy a Yum Flash Mob Jr., you catch a few fish and it falls apart. And you may not, you may be one of those guys that go, you know what, this isn't for me. You didn't have to invest a lot of money. Or you can just go out, you buy the hog farmer. I like the 5R 8 blade. You rig it up, and when you catch 5 or 6 fish, you don't have to worry about it falling apart. I mean, they are more expensive, but just buy a lure retriever, and they'll pay for itself. That
one's deal is like here a lot in the fall when you're throwing it, we catch a lot of white bass too. We might catch, in one day, I might catch 100 white bass with my clients, and whatever it is, 20 to 40 bass, largemouth, from 2 pounds to 10 pounds, whatever it is. And we're talking about putting 100 fish on a umbrella rig. So some days I'd go through 4, 5, 6 of the other brand umbrella rigs until I was introduced to the hog farmer, and I don't know how many I can catch on a hog farmer, but it's a lot, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds until the wire breaks. So it's just one of those deals. You can spend double your money on it and catch 10 times the fish, or do it the other way. And that's one of those deals that he makes quality. Everything he does is quality at hog farmer.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in the Elite Series and stuff, you can't use a rig, but Scott makes some of the best big hair jigs on the planet. I mean, if you want to imitate those
hair jig scroungers is one thing that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, the trimmering hog tie, I believe he calls it.
Yep.
My buddy that owns what I always call Lake X, he caught one about 9 pounds on that thing, and some guys really started throwing a lot here on Kentucky Lake. And, the Jerky J, Jason Lambert thing, that's great. But it's just like everything else. If you throw the same thing over and over and over, eventually they're going to stop biting it. And those guys figured out that trimmer and hog tie catches some really big fish when they've been pressured on that scrounger.
Yeah, it was one of the deals that got me into the top 10 in our Elite Series event at Guntersville this year in July, was that bait that I would catch them late in the afternoon when they started pulling water out deep. I was catching them on a swim jig and a vibrating jig in the morning in the grass, and I'd fish deep. But as soon as they started pulling water on those deep schools, once I got them fired on a crankbait, I could pull out that hog tie, that hair jig, and the scrounger hair jig that hog farmer makes, and every day I'd catch 1 or 2 big ones that ultimately got me into the top 10, because I could go behind anybody else because nobody else had it. Nobody else was throwing it.
That's one thing I like about Scott's stuff. It's always unique. He doesn't copy anybody. I mean, you could say, well, he makes an A-rig. Well, everybody did. But he tries to do something unique with every bait he makes, whether it's a stand-up swim bait head or his spunk shad, which is a awesome scrounger bait, a good drop shot bait, too. A lot of people don't think of that little...
underspin, underspin, they kill it.
Yeah, his underspins are unreal. The
war pig, I caught a ton of fish on the war pig this year at Fork, Lanier, and Guntersville. And honestly, I didn't know anything about the trimming little hair jig scrounger that he makes until Guntersville. When I showed up at Chickamauga and talked to him, he gave it to me, and I took it out there, and I wasn't expecting anything, and I fished deep school, caught whatever, 1 or 2, couldn't get on the fire, picked that thing up, first cast, bang, caught one. They never seen it before. I was like, okay, So he makes stuff that a lot of people don't, and he makes top quality, and the fish haven't seen a lot of his stuff. And I think one of his best selling deals is his little Ned head that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
But he can't even make enough of. He sells them up north and places. He has a little stand-up Ned head that's just amazing. With a weed guard and without, and he can't even make enough of.
Yeah, that thing's really crazy. I did a giveaway. Scott's always supported me and the YouTube thing, social media, and he sends me quite a bit of stuff. So I did a giveaway last early spring, maybe January, February, and it had some of the new his net heads in it. So long story short, one package got lost in the mail or something. I sent the guy some more stuff, and that same week he emails me on Sunday afternoon. He won a tournament on that net head and said, I am a customer for life. This thing, I was just playing with it, caught a 5-pounder, and they ended up winning the tournament. And he said, "Dude, this is the deal." So that's always good to see. And what's cool with your new sponsor alignments, those guys at NetBait, I know Justin Sword very well, and I know Walt. They're good people. Those are the kinds of guys I want to associate with. And Scott at Hog Farmer has been nothing but good to me. I owe him a fishing trip. I keep saying I'm gonna come down there and go fishing with him.
I agree, man. Them guys have been awesome to me. Scott at Hog Farmer. I mean, we just clicked, and there's a little relationship with him and Mickey at 316 as well. That and I don't know how that works, but Scott sells some of Mickey's stuff, and he knows quality when he sees it, and that's kind of how I got in there with Scott to start, and Michael at Waterfront kind of introduced me to Walt, and it went from there to Matt Massey and all those guys, and everybody's been super nice and easy to deal with, and I can't wait to get these relationships going and just build not only their product but mine as well, and win some tournaments.
Guys, if y'all hear some water in the background, my wife has decided to do laundry tonight, and because I'm in my little redneck bait room, is right behind the laundry room, so I apologize for that to the people listening. Let's talk a little bit more about the Elite Series. Other than the Classic and Lake Fork, what's another lake you're looking forward to going to this year? Maybe something off the wall. Not, Chickamauga was obviously a destination. Is there another lake you're really looking forward to go out there and test your strengths at?
Oh, that's a no-brainer for me. I'm going to go ahead and put two of them out there. The Sabine River, the least likeliest one that y'all would imagine. The Sabine's got me the most excited for the year. I'm more excited about Sabine than I am Lake Fork.
Really?
Yeah, it's just one of those deals, like I was talking about at the first of this podcast, that it's going to be one of those grinders. There's not big ones there, and it's tough, and it sucks, and it's a tidal fishery, and it's muddy and shallow, and you can drive for hours either way, and it's just one of those deals that it kind of evens the playing field, and those are the ones that I think are easier to win than a fork where everybody's been, and there's a million guys going to show every hole in practice, and just, at fork, man, you can pull up and catch 30 pounds on 50 spots the first week of June. It just depends if you can get in and how your timing is and who's sitting there when you get there, kind of deal. At the Sabine, it's going to be a different horse, and a bunch of these guys have been there, and I've been there a couple times, but I'm one of those grinder guys, and I'd rather go to somewhere where it's going to take 9 to 13 pounds a day, averaged over 4 days, to win than I am to go like a fork. If it's a little bit low, which it should be, and it's warm, I mean, I'm not saying we're gonna break records, but we're gonna be up there in those top 4 tournaments ever. I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and say it right now. Somebody's gonna catch 125 to 128 pounds for 4 days, somewhere in there, probably.
Wow.
The lake's a little bit low, and the Sabine River and the St. John's are the two that I'm going to just kind of throw out there that I'm excited about.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the grinder tournaments because it actually, if you're a fan of fishing drama on television, the whack fests are great, but usually everybody's catching them. The ones where it seems like the nail biters are at the end are where those tough, it's only at 5-6 bites a day, and that 1 4-pound bite can totally change everything. So I can see where you're coming from on that big time. Now I do want you to mention one thing. How different will fork fish for the major league fishing guys versus y'all?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with Sprague about that yesterday. Now we can't talk about what we'd be doing, but we're just talking in general about, I told him, man, it would be weird for me to fish in March in the major league fishing format just because I'm drawn to, being out, fishing out, or on a point or shell bed, or, fishing for one giant, or not one, but, 5 to 10 a day compared to, there's going to be just the timing on it is perfect for catching giants and a bunch of them, but there might be some, Kevin goes to the back of this creek and throws a fluke around and catches 100 or, 50 of them, 2 to 7 pounders, and then whoever, Jeff Sprague, sits out here on shell beds and catches, a 50-pound bag, but he's in 50th place. So it's going to be really weird, and I wouldn't even know how to approach it, to be honest, if I was one of them. So you're going to see huge fish caught and a bunch of fish caught, good timing, but at the same time, it'll be really cool to see and hear how those guys approached it as far as catching numbers or to catching size or both,
Yeah, that is an interesting tournament for them, and I'm a fan of fishing. I think they've got several big time tournament lakes over there, but Bass has got some big time tournaments. And I'll be honest with you, I was doing some research for this little bait video I'm putting together about the top baits of the tours, and man, I'm looking at the bait results and stuff over on FLW last year. I mean, that was pretty much a power fishing series, and you hit Lake Cherokee, and obviously it went to finesse fishing, but man, it was just like jackhammer after big crankbait after flipping jig and swim jig on FLW, and then you hit Cherokee, and it was like Ned rigs, but
Cinco, Ned rig, contact.
Yeah, in every tour, there are going to be lakes that you're just not going to catch fish unless you got a spinning rod or small finesse stuff. Just like saying, you're also going to hit lakes where you've got a power fish, and fishing finesse stuff is not going to get you a check. So I don't, when people say, oh, the MLF's the drop shot, shaky head tour, I'm like, not really. And in the same token, you can't really say that, well, just because everybody was throwing Cincos in the top 10 on bass doesn't mean it's a Cinco tour. You got to fish what the fish give to you. If you're trying to obviously take money home.
Yeah, I mean, you see everything. You have guys that are coming into the elites like John Cox and Austin Felix that just is what it is, man. They got a spinner rod and a wacky worm in their hands. It seems like 90% of the time. I mean, you're swimming jigs and chatterbaits and spinnerbaits too, but they won a lot of money the last 7 years on wacky rig Cincos, and then we got 2 other guys coming in, Brian Schmidt and Buddy Gross, that are power fish. When you think of Schmidt, you're thinking swim jig chatterbait, and Buddy, you're thinking big swim bait, offshore, big bait power fishing. So it's a good mix, and you got to know when to pull out that spinning rod and drop shot, mid rig, wacky rig, spy bait, whatever it is. You got to be versatile, no matter where you're at, whether you're at St. Clair or Winyah Bay or Fork or anywhere. It happens every single tournament. It's not something that only happens here and there. It happens every single tournament, and you got to know whether it's conditions, whether it's your spot or the fishing, when to do it. And it's one of those deals that you can't be afraid to have 6, 7 spinning rods in your boat and pull them out when you need to.
I literally bought my first one that went for bluegill fishing last year. I'm not a good wacky rig guy. I've thrown it, and I actually throw mine on baitcaster quite a bit, but I've gotten into this Nico rig big time. I found it to be really versatile the way I fish, because I can pull up to just a little piece of brush sticking out in 4 foot of water and flip it in there, and a lot of times those fish seem to eat it because the way your worm falls on a Nico rig is way different than wacky, and I think they like it falling straight down really quick. But it's a fun way to catch fish, and of course, Kentucky Lake, Tennessee River style, we figured out, hey, you can shove half-ounce drop shot weights in these 10-inch Upton's worms and whatnot, and have a big giant Nico rig out on a ledge. It's crazy. But
you gotta have them on, whether they're that big or 4-inch Cincos.
Well, one last question, Lee, and I'm gonna let you enjoy the rest of your night. Then I'm gonna cut this up to get it ready for YouTube. If there's one angler on the Bassmaster Elite Series that you would consider the intimidator, like the Dale Earnhardt, where if you're fishing and you know he's right behind you, who would be this generation's intimidator? You know, it used to be Kevin Van Dam. Who is that guy right now?
I mean, there's just right now there's one name that pops up there, and that's Zaldane. And me and Chris have a good relationship, and it is what it is. I mean, that guy got second place. I don't know how many. He got 29 second places last year or something crazy. You know, it seemed like he was always in second place. And I know Chris personally. He's a good guy. And he's all business right now. That's the best way to say it. There ain't nothing else going on in his mind but winning. He's the guy right now that's got his game face on for sure.
I'd love to get him on a Baitman Raw. He's an interesting guy. And I feel he's mentally in that place that Skeet Reese was. Remember when Skeet was getting all those second place finishes, and all of a sudden he wins the Classic and just breaks out. I feel like Zaldane's in that same zone right now. Once he tastes it, it's gonna be lights out for a few years. He's gonna fish really, really well.
Yeah, you see guys like you said, Skeet, that click, and it just. I mean, I wish I knew what it was. I'd go push the button right now, but something mentally clicks and you get it, or your mind's right. It just happens. You know, you see guys like Randall Tharp that happens too, and Aaron Martins goes through his phases, KVD, and right now it's Zaldane. He's got it going on, and hopefully I'll push him to the side, and I'll be the next one. You know, it's just one of those deals that you can't understand and can't explain, but he's definitely got it going on right now.
Absolutely. Well, I think you got a great mindset going into this Classic, going into the year, and Lee, dude, I appreciate you joining me here on the third episode of Baitman Raw. Definitely very interesting. I love talking that big swimbait game, and you can come on here anytime. I think I'm going to go to the Classic there in Guntersville, so definitely we'll see you there, and maybe I can get a trip on Fork this summer. Might have to come down there and kick KJ in the butt a little bit.
Yeah, I'm down. We need to go catch them out deep on big Swimbait. That's when it gets real fun.
Now, if anybody listening does want to come down there and you take them on a guided trip, and they just get a hold of you on Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah, that's the easiest place. Just hit me up on either of them, and we'll roll from there.
All right, Lee. Well, I appreciate it very much. And for you guys that are tuning in, make sure you follow Lee on Instagram and Facebook.
It's Lee Livesay, Livesay, Bass Elite on both of them. Lee Livesay, Bass Elite.
I want to thank Lee for joining me on here. You know, Baitman Raw is definitely raw. I'm just here in the bait room, and we always have things going on here at our house, whether it's washing machines or kids yelling or thunderstorms, who knows. But we do what we can. This is definitely not a professional production podcast. But you guys wanted it, and you guys got it. And some very interesting things that Lee brought up, especially when it talked about the glide baits and the big swim baits in general, using those to find fish and using other baits to follow up and catch them. It's something I've talked about before, but it's very interesting for him to back that up and say, hey, there's guys that are using bull shads and glide baits and S-wavers to find fish, and they catch a few fish. But what it really does, it shows those fish in the area and lets you know what's living down there. And you can turn around, whether it's a finesse bait or a jig or a soft plastic, and catch those fish. And that's really cool. And I feel Lee's not the only guy out there doing that. I know Steve Kennedy has done it. There's a famous photo of Kevin Van Dam, I believe at Fork, with the rods, like 4 or 5 rods strapped with bull shads on them. So these guys on the Elite Series, they didn't get to be the best just by throwing Ned rigs and shaky worms. They're all really, really versatile, and this is how they make their living. So those guys obviously need to cut a check every they need to cut a check every tournament, so they're going to use every tactic they can legally in their book to find these fish. So it's going to be really interesting though in those early events on Chickamauga and stuff where these guys can't throw an A rig. which has always been dominant there in the early spring, and see how they can do with some other power fishing techniques. And make no mistake about it, you can catch them on a giant swim bait, big soft plastic, paddle tail, and other things on Chickamauga during the spring. But I, I really want to thank Lee for joining in Baitman Raw. I'm going to try to get some more guests this week. Upcoming, maybe some different style guests. I may have a guy on here that's a good friend of mine that you might have heard me mention. He qualified for the All-American and through the BFL ranks. A good friend of mine, his name's Zach Grounds, and he basically hung up fishing just to kind of play golf because he was really sick of all the things going on in the industry, from payouts to tournament schedules to hard to get sponsorships for guys that are truly fishermen. And Zach's a good friend of mine, and he has a really good story and very opinionated. And I think people need to hear that side of the industry. It's not all unicorns and fairies. There's a lot of weird, crazy stuff that goes on behind the scenes that guys don't know about. So, but anyway, hope you guys loved listening to this episode of Baitman Raw, and thank you all for the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do. Be sure to give this a like and a follow on PodBean. Thank you guys so much. I will see you guys after the new year on Baitman Raw.